Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss my thoughts on today's Prime Minister's questions, as Boris Johnson completely dropped his pretense at humility and, despite admitting that he had broken the law, insisted that the opposition should be asking him the questions he wants to answer, not the ones they want to ask. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So I talked earlier today about the hint that Johnson might postpone his visit to India to make sure he doesn't lose the vote tomorrow that will decide if he should be investigated for contempt of Parliament. He announced at the start of PMQs that he was buggering off for that visit as soon as he'd finished pretending to answer questions in the House, so I'm guessing there is no problem with getting the necessary votes needed to block that motion tomorrow. I wonder how many Conservative MPs who will be voting to protect a criminal Prime Minister from a parliamentary investigation will come to regret it. I saw a newspaper front page on Monday, I think it was. I can't remember exactly what newspaper. And it said that Johnson had crossed the Rubicon with the Partygate fines. There's a complete misunderstanding of the analogy. You know, they used it to mean that he was past the danger point and was basically in the clear over the matter. That's not what crossing the Rubicon means. It means the opposite of being past the danger, in fact. It means passing a point of no return and putting yourself in a high-risk situation from which there is no graceful return. That's what Conservative MPs are going to do tomorrow. But I can deal with any interesting developments from that later this week. For now, what happened in PMQs? Well, I don't think, personally, it started particularly well for Boris Johnson. A Conservative MP asked the first of the engagement question, then the first question. You think, Tory MP, they're obviously there to back Johnson up. It's Neil Hudson from part of the north of England. And he had to point out that his area hadn't been given any funding for buses in the latest announcement. And Johnson just replied that, yeah, the government want to put more into buses. But why don't they then? In my local area, bus services are being cut. The same is happening in a lot of areas. Boris Johnson campaigned partly on a platform of improving transport services as part of his levelling up strategy. So why are they getting worse? Why are services being dropped? Because when it came time to actually delivering, whole pages of his promises were ripped up and the money spirited away, presumably to the offshore tax havens of Tory donors. And this was a Tory MP asking. What were opposition MPs going to be asking? Starmer decided to maintain his focus on Johnson's failure of moral leadership over Partygate. But rather than urging Johnson to resign, which he knows he won't, or his MPs to replace him, which he strongly suspects they won't, he instead picked at a hypocrisy. He asked why Allegra Stratton had to resign. Now, Stratton was one of Boris Johnson's officials and famous for having to resign. She was the first person that had to resign over Partygate. And despite being one of the very few people, it seems, working in Downing Street who doesn't actually seem to have attended any of the parties. So why did she have to resign when she was guilty only of making light of the law breaking of others and not Johnson, who was directly guilty? Johnson didn't seem to have an answer for that. So then Starmer brought up Professor Neil Ferguson and Matt Hancock, the former health secretary. He said that Johnson approved of Ferguson's resignation and even tried to claim credit for Hancock's, when he was found to have broken the rules. Starmer asked why the Prime Minister thinks everyone else's actions have consequences except his own. And this is the point when Johnson got bored of the whole affair. It's like he was thinking, look, I pretended to be sorry yesterday, all yesterday, like 2 whole hours of me pretend. Do you know how hard it is to pretend I'm sorry? And now I'm coming back here today. I could have just buggered off to India this morning. I didn't. I came here to be asked questions, and now you're asking me the same questions, and I don't want you to ask me these questions. So he retreated back into his usual churlish behaviour of complaining about the questions. And he's done this numerous times before. Stop asking me these questions. I don't like them. Ask me these other questions instead. I've got some questions for you. You're obviously rubbish at coming up with questions. I'll give you some questions to ask me. Go on. On this occasion, he wanted Starmer to ask him about Ukraine or energy prices. Really? Does he really? Would he really want Starmer asking him why the government has just imposed the largest increase in energy prices ever and how our nearest G7 neighbour seemed to have kept it low? Could even use the figures. What, oh, you want me to ask you, okay, why, Prime Minister, have you allowed energy prices in this country to go up by 54%, where the French government made sure theirs only went up by 4%? Because these external factors that you seem to keep blaming apply to France as well, you know. Does he also want Starmer to ask him why the government have been giving public money to businesses that are still operating in Russia and have continued to give public money to these businesses even after the full-scale invasion? When the government are urging businesses to stop doing business in Russia, we're still giving public money to businesses in Russia. Comes to something when Boris Johnson would rather be asked questions about his failure of government than his failure of morality. And then over the next few questions, of course, during which Boris Johnson accepted that he'd broken the law. He did say, Starmer said, do you accept you've broken the law? Yes. He just kept trying to moan about Jeremy Corbyn or, Islington elitists. From a political point of view, don't mind that at all, really. Just shows how desperate he is. The latest YouGov poll ratings show Keir Starmer now to be the most popular politician in the UK right now. It's not a stunning figure. Politicians tend not to be universally popular, but it's significantly higher than Johnson's rating, and crucially, Starmer's winning out in all categories, including the elderly, who vote in large numbers. And this is where Conservative MPs would be well advised to proceed with caution tomorrow. But they won't. But this is also why Johnson's trying to bring up Corbyn again. I think he liked it when Corbyn was in charge. Oh, things are so much simpler back then. Can't handle Starmer, so he tries guilt by association. He's done it before, didn't work then, won't work now. And when Johnson tried to pull the Islington metropolitan elite thing again, I mean to say, Boris Johnson actually bought a multi-million-pound mansion in Islington. Then came a bone of contention that might come up again. So when meeting with his MPs last night to calm them down, Boris Johnson was reported to have criticised, as well as the Archbishop of Canterbury, BBC coverage of Ukraine, saying that they were more critical of his Rwanda plan than of Putin's invasion. That was what was reported. Starmer brought this up and invited Johnson to apologise. Johnson said that he made no such criticism. Now, interesting, much later on in PMQs, towards the end really, in fact, it was after, I think it was technically after, Starmer and Johnson had left the chamber at this point, but a Tory MP said that he was at the meeting and Johnson said no such thing, and he's saying, Starmer should really correct the record, I think Tory MPs are fine one to be talking about correcting the record. But the Speaker said, well, I wasn't at the meeting. I don't know. It's not true, do I? And really, if any Conservative MPs are wanting to take issue with this, they need to take issue against the media outlets reporting it. Because after all, Starmer was only citing what he'd been reported in the press. He wasn't coming out with new information. He was just citing what's reported in the press. Now, if Boris Johnson is suggesting that either the press are lying or that one of his own MPs lied to the press about what he said, well, he should say so. In fact, I wish Starmer had put it like that, because he had one more question. I'd have put it like that personally. I'd have just said, in response, I'm only discussing what has been reported. If the Prime Minister is claiming that either the press are lying or that one of his own MPs has lied to the press, then he need only say so, and I will accept his version of events for now, despite the unreliability of his version of events in this House of late. And I think I would have said that, because it wasn't just one outlet reporting it. It's all of them. It's in the popular press last night. Johnson's alleged comments from last night were in all of the media. It was widely reported. But the main points made were that Boris Johnson expects everyone to take the rap for his misdeeds. The entire focus of government right now is focused on saving Johnson's skin. That's it. That's all it's doing. And it was a sentiment explicitly made by Ian Blackford of the SNP as well. Amongst other choice things he had to say about Boris Johnson, he called for his resignation on a matter of urgency and said, we have a Prime Minister who cannot be trusted with the truth and a Chancellor who cannot be trusted with his taxes. And Johnson replied, because Blackford had suggested that Boris Johnson was actually a liability to the Conservative Party. And Johnson replied that if he were a liability to his party, then Blackford wouldn't be calling for his resignation. Now, this is just one of those responses that will pass most people by, a bit of politics, but I think it's a damning window into Johnson's soul. That was the more interesting response for me. The fact is, Boris Johnson is a liability to the Conservative Party. Polling shows that. Yes, Conservative MPs are either hoping that things blow over and he gets back to being an asset, or that they don't have to drop him now, they can wait till later. But right now, he is a liability. That's clear. Ian Blackford and his party are strongly opposed to the Conservatives. So yes, from a purely political perspective, Boris Johnson remaining in charge is to their political good. And that's all Boris Johnson can see, though, isn't it? So he thinks the calls for his resignation are illogical. But there are politicians who want to ply their trade within a framework of common decency. Not all politicians are dishonest like Johnson. You know, you can see political advantage in a situation, but you can still see the situation has been bad overall for the country and its people and want it to end. You know, the SNP can be happy that the Conservatives are helping their cause, but unhappy that Johnson is debasing our country. But Boris Johnson can't see that, can he? Because morality is a constraint as far as he's concerned. It must be used only when it's advantageous to con others, and then cast aside when it's a burden. In Johnson's mind, there is only personal profit in any desire, never common good. Of all his responses today and yesterday, this is the one that stood out for me. Seemingly innocuous, but it stood out for me because it sets out who and what he is. Every action and every utterance from him is about personal gain, or it is of no value. And finally, another party leader, Liz Saville-Roberts, said that she'd been pushing for a bill to ban politicians from lying for 15 years. Would the Prime Minister support the bill, she asked. Naturally, he declined to do so, insisting that ministers... He said that Commons rules demand that ministers tell the truth in the Commons. That you think, well, okay, but what happens when they don't? Like, what's the penalty? Oh, there's no penalty? Okay, then. Also, you say about Commons rules in the Commons, why shouldn't politicians be banned from lying in any official capacity? Why should they not also tell the truth outside the Commons in their professional capacity? If they want to tell lies to their families and in their private capacity, okay. But why shouldn't they always be held to account for what they say in whatever forum? But there we are. Those are my thoughts on PMQs from today. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And until next time, I'll see you later.